inflation, they won't even notice. John Maynard Keynes, an English economist who at one point lost so much of his savings in the stock market, he wanted to ban it for whom he considered dumb money, because they were making everything so much more complicated, therefore unpredictable. He was rightly worried about the consequences of Treaty of Versailles. He predicted it will negatively affect the economy of whole European continent and will increase the tensions, especially in Germany and among all nation-states of Europe. Yet, in the preface to the German edition of his famous book, The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, he said his theory of output as a whole is much more easily adapted to the conditions of a totalitarian state. And the day was September 7th, 1936. Nonetheless, Keynes was made a lord in 1942 for his service in the Bank of England. Make a brief Google search and you will see he's being celebrated as a genius by so many contemporary people. If by a genius you mean a reckless illusionist, hands down, I would agree with you. In this video, I'll briefly tell you what his solution to unemployment is, and you will see why I called him a reckless illusionist. Before beginning, let me give you two easy definitions. In economics, a money wage is the wage pronounced in terms of its money amount. If someone is paid $5,000 monthly, their money wage is $5,000 per month. But you cannot always buy the same amount of products and services with $5,000. What this amount of money can afford in reality is called the real wage. Classical economists like Adam Smith assumed people would almost precisely know how much their real wages changed, and people would react to that. If just by economic policy you decrease their purchasing power by decreasing their wages, they would protest, and they would not be willing to work for the same amount of time for a wage that is less than before. They would negotiate to protect their rightly earned liberal rewards. The 20th century shows it is not that rationally simple with people, and rather tricky, and Keynes is observant of this. In chapter 2 of his book, The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, Keynes writes, although a reduction in the existing money wage would lead to a withdrawal of labor, it doesn't follow that a fall in the value of the existing money wage in terms of wage goods would do so if it were due to a rise in the price of the latter. In other words, it may be the case that within a certain range, the demand of labor is for a minimum money wage and not for a minimum real wage. Whilst workers will usually resist a reduction of money wages, it is not their practice to withdraw their labor whenever there is a rise in the price of wage goods. Whether logical or illogical, experience shows that this is how labor in fact behaves. What he says is as clear as day. If you reduce someone's money wage, like you were paying them $5,000 per month, now all of a sudden you're paying them $4,000 per month, they would be mad at you. They would protest. They would react to that. But on the other hand, not touching their $5,000 per month, if you reduce what this $5,000 can buy in real terms by inflation, some people would notice it, but many more of them won't react to that, adding up to saying they won't even notice. He's got a sense of humor. You gotta give him that. Keynes has got a sense of dark humor. And the problem is, he's actually right. People know there is inflation, but they cannot follow its rate. Recently, someone was telling me they expect a big return on his investment because interest rates are high nowadays, I asked him if he knows the inflation rate and therefore the real returns of his investment. He told me, yeah, he knows there's inflation. So I asked him, then what is your real return on your investment? And he couldn't answer. I said, okay, you know there's inflation, but do you know how much this inflation actually is? He told me, no, how much is it? You're the economist, you tell me. You don't need to be an economist, but you need to be able to do mathematics. And a lot of people are really bad at mathematics. You gotta also need to be able to accurately scrutinize the information you have been given. And a lot of people don't know how to do it either. Alright, but why does Keynes want to lower real wages? It is because then capital owners, whether private or public, can hire more people for the same amount of total cost. And more people working would mean more production aggregately, more production overall. But who owns this newly produced things? Obviously not the wage earners. More employment would obviously also mean less unemployment. Duh. Even though now nobody can afford. Except businesses, we are all affording less now, and we are all miserable. But at the same time, most of us are now working more, so your unemployment problem is solved. In the same chapter 2, Keynes says, men are involuntarily unemployed if, in the event of a small rise in the price of wage goods relatively to the money wage, both the aggregate supply of labor willing to work for the current money wage and the aggregate demand for it at that wage would be greater than the existing volume of employment. Here he defines involuntary unemployment. Involuntarily unemployed people are those people who are willing to work for smaller amounts of wages, but they cannot work because other people are hired and getting paid more. Pretty much. Keynes goes on saying, obviously, however, if the classical theory is only applicable to the case of full employment, it is fallacious to apply it to the problems of involuntary unemployment, if there be such a thing. And who will deny it? He says, who will deny it? Who will deny it? We know there are so many people out there who are willing to work for lesser wages. Who will deny it? But how are the real wages decreased without decreasing money wages? How is the inflation generated? How is the economy stimulated? It is by cheap credit. Decrease the interest rates, and voila. Now everyone borrows money, which is credit, and credit is money likewise. So money supply increases. When supply of a thing increases, its value decreases. In this monetary case, when money supply increases, its value is depreciated, meaning you can buy less things with the same amount of money. Let me explain this to you roughly. This won't be an accurate explanation at all, but will settle the main idea in an easy way. Let's say this is such a simple economy. There are other products going into the apple production, and there is a business class doing those businesses, but the only consumer product is an apple. And a person only needs an apple a month. Let's say we are 10 working people, some unemployed people with no money, and a business class. Let's say each of the apple workers among us are being paid $10 a month, producing 1 apple a month in the apple gardens. And we are trading 10 apples among us, and price of 1 apple is $10 in the beginning. Let's say the amount of money the business owners have is X, and their apple consumption is negligible. Let's say we have a government who likes to print money. Each of the workers among us borrowed $10 more this month from this government, but still get paid $10 a month, now each managing $20, half of which is debt. Also, the business owners borrowed X amount of money from the government, So half of the money businesses manage is also debt. Next day you go to the marketplace and you want to buy an apple. The seller has seen the market today and observed an increase in his costs, because all of a sudden everyone is using more money, paying more money, and asking for more money. Plus, he knows you can afford up to $20 today, so he decided to do the same, and he asks for your $20. You don't comply, he bargains. He says, "Okay, give me $18. Let's say you don't buy this apple, but someone else buys it from $18. Soon enough, everyone starts buying an apple from $18, and you have to go along with it as well if you're certain that you want that apple. Now, what happened? Before, each one of 10 working people had $10, and the businesses had X dollars. The money supply in the economy was 100 plus X dollars, and every one of us was able to afford an apple from $10 with our own money. Now the money supply in the economy is 200 plus 2x dollars. It is doubled. The price of an apple is $18, so the rate of inflation is 80%. A wage earner with $10 of wage and $10 of credit can afford an apple from $18 using credit, and keep an extra $2 as credit. But this whole $10, 50% of the money they use is debt now. And if they don't want to be in debt, they can afford only 10 over 18, which is 55% of an apple with their own money. In reality, we are still 10 plus people trading 10 apples among us, but since everyone has debt and bargained the price of an apple over this debt, we all agree not only half of our money is debt now, but also somehow we cannot afford an apple anymore, but we buy it anyways. Why did we all agree to be in debt in the first place if each of us personally were not going to change how much we trade? Does this seem dumb to you? Because it is dumb, and it is what happens every day in economies today. The argument for doing this is that now the wage earners are still getting paid $10 a month, but there is more money in the economy. Therefore, at least some of those previously unemployed people can be employed this time. So in total, we'll work more and produce more. This extra production in turn would increase the supply of goods and decrease the prices in time, but the whole body of people, except the business owners, are still much worse off unless we produced so much more, like 20 apples a month, let's say, for our simplistic hypothetical example. But this is rarely the case. And if it's the case, it's after a long period of delay. In most cases, the new production level is not high enough to cancel out the effect of inflation deliberately caused by the monetary policy. Keynes uses the term redistribution in his book many times, but only as a cold term of economics, not for any policy suggestion. Distribution of economic assets is not his main concern. And if the entrepreneurs and capital owners are winning because of policies he suggests, it is only because he sees this fit in order to maximize the output of the country. His sole concern is the output of the nation state. He doesn't care how it is produced. He doesn't care how it is distributed. He may say otherwise, but he pretty much doesn't care if people are better off or worse off. He even doesn't care whether this production is wasted or not. He only cares about maximizing the output of the nation state. When Keynes suggested these policies were already in action in the United States and in many other countries for a while. What Keynes did was to provide a theory for these policies and legitimize these policies, make them applicable for broader use, and make them mainstream. Policies targeting the money supply, leading to much similar effects, were also applied by Lenin in the Soviet Union. And there they had another goal in mind, making the money useless. Yet their endeavors didn't end up working permanently well in the long term, And they had to change course many times in the Soviet Union in terms of how they managed the economy. Maybe Keynes thought, if Soviets were also doing these things, why wouldn't they? In Adam Smith's liberal economy, you would maintain interest rates lower than the rates of profits, so people would maintain motivation to do business and create value. And you would maintain these interest rates higher than the inflation rate, so people's savings would not melt away and people who don't know what to do with their stocks wouldn't hoard them uselessly, but instead would see a profit in lending this capital to others for productive purposes. Hence, this would be a productive use of credit system, beneficial to everyone. It is not recklessly and artificially generating endless amounts of virtual credit money. If you supported Adam Smith's view, you wouldn't play around the interest rate and money supply much to cause mayhem in the economy. Adam Smith saw the world from a moral perspective as well as a naturalistic one, and he would deem such practices of manipulation by monetary policy as immoral, since such practices affect the well-being of individuals by force, confiscating their savings by inflation. And he would see such practices as an unproductive interruption as well to the natural way of things. According to Adam Smith, a government should only intervene to assure safety and dignity of individuals, to make sure no one harms and prevents another's liberal rights, and to make sure competition continues. Adam Smith's liberal view is an optimistic one, where there is no monopolies. Monopolies prevent people from bargaining and therefore burdens them with monopoly prices that are such prices which function like an unnecessary extra taxation on people, causing inefficiencies in economy, prevents competition and innovation, and harms the well-being of everyone. Adam Smith's liberal view is an optimistic view where there is no mercantilist policies supporting such monopolies, no trade embargoes, no tariffs. Wars are such irrational wastes of resources. If the whole world was in peace and free, people with liberty would know what is best for themselves and would do it. Whereas the Keynesian world makes it viable for states to cooperate with monopoly-like enterprises. It's a world individual power is squeezed. Competing nations wage wars. And Keynes even see wars as an opportunity to stimulate nation-state economies if their horrifying effects would be negated and if there is nothing better to do. For Adam Smith, we produce so we can consume. Keynes turns it around 180 degrees. For Keynes, we must consume, so we'll have a reason to produce more. For Keynes, we consume, so we can produce. Some people see liberal economy as a synonym to capitalism. Liberal economy is not the synonym of capitalism. In fact, liberal economy was never fully achieved. Liberal economy has its puzzles to solve. For example, how it's going to be established, despite the fact that competition among nation-states and warmongering of imperialist powers generate all the reasons in terms of a prisoner's dilemma for a liberal world to be prevented from existence. As long as liberal economic theory doesn't solve these puzzles, it will stay as a utopia. On the other hand, capitalism is by definition our reality, because we call what we have today capitalism. And it's a mixture of many things, which include mercantilist endeavors like monopoly power and today's Keynesian policies. Even though Marx himself couldn't provide a sound solution to any of our problems in terms of economic theory, he was vigorously aware of the problems of this mixed political economic system with mercantilist aspects we call capitalism today. It seems Keynes read Marx pretty well, and he could see how Marx failed to solve these problems, and he decided to make these problems worse. So if Marx was contemporary with Keynes, he would direct 10 times of the criticisms he made for capitalism to the Keynesian system. One aspect of Marx's criticism of capitalism is that Marx says capitalism has an overproduction problem in certain times and in certain spheres of production in such a way that a capitalist economy cannot manage resources in time to meet the needs. Instead, it sometimes ends up producing something unnecessary and wastes resources which otherwise could be diverted to produce something useful. This is caused by the complications in the business cycle. Keynes turns this around 180 degrees as well. He argues that the capitalist economy doesn't have an overproduction problem in certain times in certain spheres, but it instead has a problem of insufficient demand and insufficient consumption. What do Keynesian economic policies do to increase this demand? They stimulate economy by printing money, providing cheap credit. What happens in the end? We live in an illusion where we are all in debt, whereas we keep spending and spending, consuming and consuming. In turn, our debt increases, and what do we do to keep going? We borrow even more. We generate even more debt to meet our previous debts. And this is pretty much what happens in a Keynesian boom, until the illusion collapses and everyone defaults at once. In reality, we all worked hard, produced a lot, consumed a lot, and wasted a lot as well for that matter. The debt here is what I call the illusion. Money was the illusion here. Yet this illusion hooked us even more, made us addicts. And credit money was our addiction. We got more and more into it as long as we could. We kept getting credit and using it, and it worked until it didn't. Yet, was the political economic establishment true to this illusion? Did they let it go when it didn't push the economy anymore, but instead gave it a heart attack because it was pushed too far? Did they erase people's debts? No. People lost homes. People lost jobs. People lost their life savings. People lost everything. They sent officers to collect people's debts, but saved the big corporations they deemed too big to fail. With the taxed money generated from the very same everyday people they considered as expendables. Keynes also argues, as well as the economy can be stimulated, it can be slowed down by increasing interest rates and decreasing the money supply, as new credits won't be demanded from these new higher interest rates, and the ones already in place will be paid. However, this also means increasing unemployment. And this time things are much harsher because people are already in debt. This is usually thought to have negative political consequences. Therefore, authorities avoid doing such things and basically let things go as long as they can. And in the end, they let the economy hit the wall with full speed. Keynes is aware of this, and even though he warns about this, when additional things he wrote are considered, it's obvious to me that Keynes focused on stimulating the economy much more as well, than using the brakes when it's necessary. In chapter 10 of his book, The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, Keynes writes, "Pyramid building, earthquakes, even wars may serve to increase wealth. If the education of our statesmen on the principles of the classical economics stands in the way of anything better. It's curious how common sense, wriggling for an escape from absurd conclusions, has been apt to reach a preference for wholly wasteful forms of loan expenditure rather than for partly wasteful forms, which, because they are not wholly wasteful, tend to be judged on strict business principles. For example, unemployment relief financed by loans is more readily accepted than the financing of improvements at a charge below the current rate of interest. Whilst the form of digging holes in the ground known as gold mining, which not only adds nothing whatever to the real wealth of the world, but involves the disutility of labor, is the most acceptable of all solutions. If the treasury were to fill old bottles with banknotes, bury them at suitable depths in disused coal mines, which are then filled up to the surface with town rubbish, and leave it to private enterprise on well-tried principles of laissez-faire to dig the nodes up again, the right to do so being obtained, of course, by tendering for leases of the node-bearing territory, there need be no more unemployment, and with the help of the repercussions, the real income of the community and its capital wealth also would probably become a good deal greater than it actually is. It would indeed be more sensible to build houses and the like. But if there are political and practical difficulties in the way of this, the above would be better than nothing. The analogy between this expedient and the gold mines of the real world is complete. At periods when gold is available at suitable depths, experience shows that the real wealth of the world increases rapidly. And when but little of it is so available, our wealth suffers stagnation or decline. Thus gold mines are of the greatest value and importance to civilization. Just as wars have been the only form of large-scale loan expenditure which statesmen have thought justifiable, so gold mining is the only pretext for digging holes in the ground, which has recommended itself to bankers as sound finance, and each of these activities has played its part in progress, failing something better. For Keynes, a loss is not a waste, because now it generates a need and triggers production and causes people to be employed. Okay, let's bring this argument to the most extreme and see what happens. Let's imagine we have lost everything we have. All the infrastructure, goods, real estate, tools of production as well, just everything. Now, all of this would be needed to be produced all over again. Would Keynes still make the same argument? Here is an endless task for you to complete, and you can employ an endless amount of labor for this task. Build the civilization from the ground zero. Would Keynes say this enormous need of labor now fixed our unemployment problem? All Keynes focuses on is to maximize the output of the nation state. If something produced is not sold this year, in his way of accounting, it's counted in the books of this year as an investment. It doesn't matter even if it's never going to be used. Consumption stimulates the investment and government expenditure. The motto of a citizen in a Keynesian economy is to consume hard and work hard. Regardless of how much is wasted, the big nation state and its big corporations rise above people and make their stand in the global competition of such warmongering entities. To me, these economic policies shouldn't be qualified as a solution to anything, because to me, a solution should be a nice one. This is a nasty one. There is nothing nice about deliberately melting people's wealth so they're forced to work more today to maintain the same lifestyles they had yesterday. A nice solution needs to be motivating people in a positive manner, not by fear of loss. And it should make everyone a winner, not a loser. To me, these economic policies rather seem like a strategy of a state for basic survival in an endless conflict among the states of the world. These policies are not of flourishing wealth, but rather of a lose-lose Nash equilibrium. States using these centralist monetary policies, alongside other things, stimulate defense industries, getting in endless arms races. What Keynes describes is a war economy. If it's a peaceful time, it's still a war economy. Keynesian system is what I call war economy in peacetime. Is this the best we can do? This prisoner's dilemma of imperial endeavors has been played iteratively countless times. So many people died. So much is wasted. Even though we see countries cooperating on certain things, concentrated powers still more than often choose betrayal over cooperation in vital issues. Cooperation would allow nicer policies for everyone in all countries and entities. Cooperating first, unless a betrayal occurs, and randomly forgiving even if a betrayal occurs is a strategy called tit for tat with random forgiveness. There are experiments done with game theory models which has shown a cooperating set of players using tit for tat with random forgiveness strategy increase their frequencies in time and become the most dominant ones in a population. This can be a topic for another video. Maybe throughout our human history, we didn't yet spend enough time for cooperative strategies to be the dominant ones among our states. This shouldn't prevent us from looking for better solutions. This is Truthful. I invite everyone to invest in truth. Take good care of yourselves and see you next time.